Comrade Chair.
Yeah, so last time we were discussing whether the changes that happened in MDC were relevant, whether does it matter that it has been hijacked by the elites. So you were still summarizing part of your points. So you can carry on, Comrade Lisai.
Okay, thanks, Ishe. I think we had discussed the issue of why the MDC, which started as a party formed by workers, radical anti-capitalist students as the primary force factor, why it was hijacked, both in terms of its leadership today, that it is now the working class have been thrown out and is now predominantly middle class elites, lawyers, business people, other professionals supported by international capital and big business. And why the very ideology of the party has changed from a pro-poor social democratic ideology today to an ideology based on austerity, neoliberalism, what they call we eat what we kill, and ease of doing business. And in fact, so we looked at the factors why the MDC was hijacked. And amongst the major factors that we pointed out to the factor that the trade union leaders of the MDC led by Tsvangirai lacked a relevant ideological canvas within which to guide themselves in the party. And that way they were easily neutered, they were easily co-opted by the middle class elites who came in, and most of those middle class elites supported and accepted the logic of neoliberalism, of capitalism as the way forward. To them, the only problem for Zimbabwe was lack of democracy and human rights. But the economic policies of neoliberalism, of ISAP, that were being sponsored by the IMF, the World Bank, big business, and Western governments, which were the same governments and forces, by the way, which were also sponsoring the civic groups, the NGOs, the academia, who had joined the MDC. So we pointed out that factor as the major factor, and the factor that there was no adequately trained cadreship in the MDC, and that the Tsvangirais and the leadership failed to generate and build a new generation of socialist ideologically trained, anti-capitalist ideologically trained young trade unionists, such that by today, most of the young trade unionists who have taken over positions of leadership in trade unions lack any serious ideological training in an anti-capitalist way. That was the second reason. The third reason we looked at was that obviously the structure of intervention of the unions in the MDC was wrong. The unionists entered the MDC as individuals, even with their minimum ideological training, and they did not participate as a collective force. But when workers can only have effect and power when they operate as a collective, when they operate as a group, because workers don't have the money, the connections, and some of the skills that the elites have. But when they do so as a group, they are able to have more than enough of those. But workers' leaders in the MDC operate as individuals. So they are atomized, they are individualized. And they are competing with middle-class elites, business people who have money and who are able to bribe and influence their way into positions of power and influence in the party. And then finally, we refer to the fact that not finally, the lack of internal democracy in the MDC. That internal democracy was stifled, was killed, and the personality cult around Tsvangirai was evolved to the benefit primarily of the elites, the middle classes, the business people. And then the final reason that we gave was, the fourth reason that we gave was that the low levels of class struggle in the country between 2002 to about 2015, 2016 meant that radicalism amongst workers, amongst students, amongst youth declined significantly, and it allowed the rising to the top of the moneybags, of the elites, the fat cats, the Kutu of the West. And there was not an adequate counter force. So those were the four primary reasons. The fifth and final reason that I should highlight was that the moneybags, the elites, the NGOs, the imperialists were able to hijack, were able to take over the leadership of the party, change as well its ideology, because the working class of Zimbabwe, by the time it built the MDC, had not yet built a sufficiently strong, big, powerful, and rooted socialist revolutionary party or movement that would have acted as the university of the working class, the memory bank of the working class, the think tank and strategy platform for the working class. The ISO was there. The ISO made a serious attempt at countering and fighting the reactionary right-wing forces. The ISO had, by that stage, in Harare, in Bulawayo, in Chinhoyi, we had branches in about 4 or 5 towns, mainly made up of workers. But we also had strong student components in the University of Zimbabwe, Harare Polytechnic, NUST, Midland State University later on, yes, MSU. And this is where we had young student leaders led by the likes of Hope Ogumbo. Initially, your Lenmo Jongwes, your Wendes, Charlton Wende, your Chimbalus, Briggs Bomba, and Nelson Chamisa himself was an active member of the ISO at the Harare Polytechnic. And in fact, as I said earlier on, so if you take in Bulawayo, in Matabeleland, the building of the MDC in 1999, Hopewell Gumbo would have been the deputy to Gibson Suanda. In Mashingo, the trade union leader was Kumbirai Kudenga. A deputy would have been Nelson Chamisa. So there was a powerful student movement, but still the point is that the ISO was too small, less than 300 members, and not sufficiently rooted in trade unions. You required a strong force, a strong socialist force within this broad working class movement that had emerged, which would have been strong enough to counter. I also refer to you to the statement from Changirai, when he says that when the party initially started in 99, he says there were very few white people, business people who did not like it, and he says the few white people who were there were Eddie Cross, David Coulthard, people like Stevenson, Jude, I think, Stevenson. But Changirai, in his autobiography, says that one of the main reasons why the big business did not support the MDC was because of the presence of communists from the ISO, including myself. So even he himself acknowledges that point. So it shows that there was that influence. I've also referred to you how there was resistance to us. For instance, at the February 1999 Working People's Convention, which formed the MDC, the ISO was the only group that was not allowed to join the convention because centrists like Changirai did not want us in, they did not want us to influence. We were calling for the formation of a workers' party led by workers, radical students, with a clear anti-capitalist ideology. We had been calling for this as early as 1997 when the strike started. We were amongst the first to call for the formation of a workers' party. So we were not allowed in, but we were still outside selling our socialist worker. We the socialist worker, just like this one here that we produced in the anti-Mugabe demonstrations of 2017. But we worked very closely with the ZCTU regional district leaderships in the various towns that we operated, especially in Harare and then in Bulawayo. So, but the sad thing is that by the time the MDC emerges, we were still too small. The working class had not built a sufficiently big enough political force, socialist force, running into thousands, embedded into the major unions. that would have been sufficient enough to take on head-on the neoliberal elites and middle classes that had come from the NCA, the Forum Party, the academia. And that for me is the biggest lesson of the Zimbabwean struggles and the MDC. That by the time the crisis of capitalism deepens, explodes into mass struggles with the rapid growth of consciousness and radicalization of many ordinary people, workers, by that time, you need the working class, the most advanced sections of trade unionists, youth, must have built a strong socialist party. And this is a lesson for our comrades in South Africa, because in many ways South Africa is going to have shows the kind of processes that we saw in Zimbabwe between 1997 2000, a massive radicalization. You need a strong enough socialist party, a big enough socialist party to ensure that the working class is able to ideologically, organizationally, strategically counter the capitalists and their agents, who are usually the middle classes, the middle class elites. So the unfortunate thing is that we're not, and by 2003 we had been expelled. The ISO had been expelled from the MDC. And the construction of that party or that organization has to be done before the explosion of the big struggles that we saw in Zimbabwe that led to the MDC, or what we're seeing today in Sudan and in Algeria, or what we saw earlier on in 2011 in Egypt and Tunisia. When you have those big explosions, you need to have built the Revolutionary Party beforehand, a sizable revolutionary mass party running into thousands. And that's a difficult process, because during that time, most people would not be accepting the ideas of socialism. They would find it difficult to believe that capitalism can be defeated, because obviously the ideas that prevail and dominate in society are the ideas of the ruling class. And a fundamental idea of the ruling class is to push into the heads of people that society cannot be changed as it is. Society must remain in which a small minority of capitalists own and control the wealth of society, and that working people can only be workers and poor peasants, and that socialism is not achievable. But obviously, ideas change over time, consciousness change over time, especially as capitalism goes into crisis. So that is the fundamental lesson, I believe. Build the revolutionary party, build the revolutionary organization before the revolts of the working class explode.